These days, many seem to believe that World War II ended on D-Day, June 6, 1944. This was a major turning point to the war, but it certainly was not the end. The war would continue for another 11 months before Germany would surrender, and it would take another 4 months beyond that, and two big bombs, before Japan would wave a white flag. When the Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, the Axis was caught with his pants down. Thanks to a fair amount of misinformation, the majority of Germany's troops were on the wrong side of France. However, information traveled fast, and in less than 2 days, the Das Reich was on the move. This march north was a path of bloodshed and destruction. On June 8th, a French resistance meeting was caught by surprise in the tiny hamlet of Gobludet. At least 40 members of the resistance were killed. 70 were captured, and their meeting place was burned to the ground. The very next day, in Tully, France, 99 suspected dissidents were hanged from lampposts and balconies throughout the streets. Another 150 citizens were deported to death camps. As horrible as these days in history were, they cannot compare to what happened on June 10th, 1944. Just 4 days after D-Day, the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, led by Sturmbannführer Adolf Deichmann, entered the small rural village of Oradour-sur-Glane and surrounded it. They blocked all exits and began rounding up the citizens. They told Mayor Jean de Sauter to assemble everyone on the fairground in the center of town. They were there for nothing more than a simple identity check. As long as everyone's papers were in order, you had nothing to fear. Once all 643 residents were assembled, however, the story changed. There were reports of hidden weapons and explosives in the village, the soldiers said. Anyone who knew where the weapons were should step forward. No one stepped forward. Not because these were strong men standing in defiance of an oppressive regime, but because there were no weapons. These were simple country folk who had remained relatively unaffected by the war up to this point. This didn't please Deichmann. He ordered the women and children to be separated from the men and locked them in a church. He then divided the men into 6 groups, placing them in 3 barns, a workshop, a garage, and a wine store. When the order was given, the soldiers fired upon the men. They intentionally shot low, striking the men in the legs and the abdomen, wounding them but not killing them. When they were satisfied that all the men were on the ground, agonizing in pain, they filled the barns and other buildings with hay and lit them ablaze, providing the men with a slow, painful death. And many were burned alive. As for 240 women and 205 children cowering in the church, the Führer regiment filled the church, first with smoke bombs asphyxiating many. When this didn't provide a quick enough death, the soldiers began hurling grenades into the church, filling the sacrosanct grounds with shrapnel and fire. Anyone who attempted to escape was gunned down. The only woman to find her way out of the church that Saturday and survive, the one to whom we owe credit for so much of this account, is Madame Marguerite Refench. She stated that she found a stool near the altar, and she used it to climb to a window. She then dropped 10 feet to the ground and made her way to a field where she buried herself among the peas. She watched a woman clutching a baby in her arms get gunned down as she tried to follow. Marguerite herself was shot 5 times, but miraculously survived. Just like with the men, after the 2nd SS Panzer Division was satisfied that nothing was left moving inside, the church was filled with hay and set ablaze. The men then moved methodically through the village, going house to house, searching for anyone who wasn't in the earlier roundup. A bedridden elderly man was burned alive in his home. A baby was shoved into the oven in a bakery. Many who were found were shot, and their bodies were dumped into one of the wells of the village. No one was safe, and few survived. Today, the village remains exactly as it was that day. Dr. De Soto's Peugeot Model 220 parked on the fairgrounds, where the mayor's son left it as he went to meet his father during the roundup. Charred brick buildings line the streets, frozen in time. It is the martyred village, a memorial to a horrible travesty that scars the countryside to this day, a reflection of a time that scars the world. In addition to Madame Reflench, 4 or 5 men survived the massacre, all of them from the group that was placed in the laundry barn. A few others slipped away prior to the roundup, and sadly, the last of these survivors, Robert Hebris, passed away on February 11th, 2023, at the age of 97. He was among the survivors from the laundry barn. He hid under the bodies of the dead until the fires were lit. Being shot seemed like a better death than being burned alive, and he made his move. Thankfully, he was able to slip away.